What's up YouTube and welcome to this video. So today we are performing CRUD operations on Firebase using the latest React, which uses functional components and hooks. So let us begin. So according to the latest documentation from React, if you want to create a new React project, it is recommended to use one of these frameworks. So these are the listed frameworks. So we are going to use the first one, which is the next.js framework. Now let's open a new terminal. Let me get to the directory. So cd desktop. Now this is the command, and after that you should write your project name. So Firebase using React hooks. Now it's asking that if we are going to use the TypeScript. No, we are using JavaScript. No, we will not use this. No, yes, and yes, and no. So these are the answers that we used. Now before installing the Firebase, it's necessary that we copy the project name and move to that location. So cd, and now we are at the location. Now npm install Firebase. Now we can open the folder with Visual Code. Now following a React tradition, I will create a components folder inside src/app, and inside this component another folder for Firebase config, and select components, another folder for Firebase CRUD. So now let's focus on Firebase config.js, and now we have to create a Firebase database. So for that you need a Google account. Search for Firebase console. Click this second link, then click go to console. If you are not signed in into your one of your Google accounts, then it will ask you to sign in. Add project, name it anything you want. So Firebase with hooks, continue, click continue, select default account, create project. Now click continue. Now first of all, go to build real-time database and create a database. Choose the location which is nearest to you, or just leave it to United States. We will start in test mode. Now get back to project overview and add a web app, Firebase hooks, or anything you like app. Now you get all of this configuration, but even if you press continue, you can get it through project settings, and here is your configuration. So copy all of this and paste it here. We don't need the analytics for now. We also need get database function from Firebase database. Now let's create a functional component Firebase config, and we will also export it. Now delete this and copy all of this inside the component, and we will return the get database function with the current configuration. So this is our Firebase config component. Now coming to our Firebase CRUD, create a new file, Firebase CRUD.js. Now we have to first specify that we are using a client component. So this component is for the client. We didn't have to specify that here because we are not rendering anything over here. So in the Firebase CRUD, we will first import the configuration, and then we will import some Firebase functions. So we need ref, set, get, update, remove and child from Firebase database. Then we will import use state from React. So this is it. Now let's create the component Firebase. Let's create some state variables. So let username and set username equals to use state, and the default will be blank. Now we will return some input with labels. So label username and input of type text, and its value will be, so its value will be attached to the username, and whenever it will change, so on change it will set the value, it will use the function set username to set the value of the username e.target.value. So this is the way to go. Our value is attached with the username, and whenever the on change function, so whenever the input changes, it will set the username. So this username property will get set. Now let's use the br tag, and I will copy and paste it several times. Now we also need some buttons. So button select data. Now let's see how it looks like. So I will use the Firebase CRUD in the page.js. We also don't need these CSS, so I will remove it. And Let's also remove all of this and this also, and we will import Firebase CRUD. So we will just return the Firebase CRUD. Now let's try to run this. So for running a next.js project, you have to type npm run dev. So control and click. So all of this looks really weird, and I don't want the next.js CSS to interfere with my design. So I will go into the global CSS and delete all of this. And you can see that after compiling, this is the result. So I have to put a little of my CSS. So let's create a file, Firebase CRUD.css. Firebase CRUD.css. Now we can focus on the actual working. So let's create the insert function. Insert data equals to arrow function. And before this, I also want to create a useful function that will be is null or white spaces. C# has this function built in, but JavaScript does not. So we will create it manually. So it will take a value, then it will make the value dot to string to apply the built-in string functions, and it will return if value equals to null. So if the value is null, it will return true, or if the value dot replace all, this is also a built-in string function, we will replace all the spaces with empty string. Then if their length is less than 1, then they are considered to be white spaces. So it will become true. Now I will use this in the insert data if alert fill all the fields and return. So it will not insert the data. So after the validation, now before using the Firebase function to write data, I also need another thing, which is I need to create a constant database which will have the Firebase config. So now I will use this database to set my data to the Firebase. Inside this, I will use a ref function which will take database as the first argument, and the second will be the address, so the path. Let's name the folder customer, and inside the customer we will save the data with the username. So this is the first argument of the setter function. Now the second argument, which will be an object with all of the properties that we want to save to the Firebase database. So first is the full name It is easier if we keep all of the alphabet small, but it's your choice. So full name. So all of the state names that we have defined here. Now let us create the second function to get the data. So let select data equals to the arrow function. To select the data, we will create a constant dbref, which will take the reference database, and then we use the get function, which takes the child function, and then the child function needs the db reference and the address, so the path. So the same path will go, and then we use the then function, which will take so an arrow function. If the snapshot exists, then set the full name with the value of snapshot that we received from the database. So the value function dot. So we are using the state functions that we defined over here to set these states, and then we are using the value that we got from the Firebase, and we are using the same name that we have saved our data to the Firebase. So we are using the same name to get the data back. So the snapshot is basically the piece of data that is saved in the form of JSON from the Firebase that we retrieve, and it can be a part of the database or or even the entire database, but usually it's just a small piece of the database, so that's why it is called snapshot. So we will only retrieve the data of one customer. So we can say that from the entire database we are just retrieving the snapshot of one customer. So that is why it is named as snapshot. If the data does not exist, then we say no data available. We also have the catch statement in case of any errors. So this is our select function. Now we can bind the functions with on click insert data, on click select data. Let's try two of these functions. So let's go to the database. Now if I enter amazing code verse hello 1234 and date of birth should not be like a simple text box, but for now let's write whatever. Insert. You can see that the customer data is inserted. So amazing codeverse has all of the data. Now we will change the type of the date of birth to date, and let's create our other functions. So creating the update and delete function is not hard. One thing that I want to do is I also want to add validation here, but only for the username, because we will retrieve the data on the basis of username. So, and one thing I want to add is I want to add this get function to the insert function. what this will do is it will first get the data of the user that we are trying to insert and check that if the snapshot exists, then it will give an error stating that the user already exists. Try a different name. And else if the user does not exist, then it will write the data. So now it will only write the data if the user does not exist. Let's copy this insert data and create the function to update data, which is pretty simple. You just have to change the set to update. In the update function, if the snapshot exists, so if the user exists, then we will gonna update his data. Otherwise, if the user does not exist, then we say that so the user does not exist, that's why we can update the information. And here we will check that if username is empty, then we will say that so for the delete function, it will say that the username is required to delete a user. And after this, it will try to get the user's data, and if a snapshot exists, if the user exists, then it will just delete the user. So for it will just delete the user. So for that we will use the remove function from the Firebase, and this will remain the same, just that we will remove the object because it only requires the path. Else we will say that the user does not exist. It is also good if you put dot then and dot catch statements after using the functions. So you remove so you can use it with the update function, and also the insert function. So now let's bind the rest of the functions. On click update data, on click delete data, and let's check them out. So now let's try to create some new data. Amazing coders to insert data. dbref is not defined. The select data has the dbref, so I have to define it all the way in the delete, in the update, and in the insert function. So now let's try to insert this. Customer added successfully. You can see that here is our customer. Now let's try to update the information to and 1 2 3 update data. So the data is updated. Now let's try to delete the first customer. Let us first get its information. Select data. So this is the information of the first customer. Now let's try to delete it. So customer deleted successfully. So the first customer is deleted. So all of our function works. So this is all for the video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up and do subscribe to the channel. See you next time.